How's it going, everybody? I'm here with my good friend Trey, who happens to be an ex-All-American college wide receiver from Hillsdale College. And today we're going to talk to you about the importance of being Christians, but also being sportsmen, being athletic, engaging in the sports, and why it's important to the moral life, the spiritual life, and Christianity in general. Because I feel like sports get a bad rep. We're in an era where the NFL, the NBA, they're all peddling bad stuff. They're all in bed with Black Lives Matter, all in bed with the ideas of Antifa. So a lot of people have just like thrown up their hands and been like, well, I'm done. I'm done with sports. And it's an overreaction. It's a knee-jerk reaction, and it's doing us dirty. It's not the right way to go as Christians. And there was already a tendency. And Trey, you know this well. You went to a very conservative school. Obviously, I did graduate theology at Franciscan University. There's already a tendency for over-piety and quietism that swallows the manly physical virtues. So we're already grappling with this danger. And I think I'm really glad you joined me today. I'm appreciative for your time, because who better to talk to Christians around the world about the importance of athletics and sport than somebody who exceeded at very high levels at sport, in a rigorous sport like football, no less, as a wide receiver. So, opening thoughts, Trey.
Yeah, no, I think thank you for the kind introduction. And I think when you said there's an overreaction to all this stuff that kind of goes towards that whole over-piety, sports are intrinsically evil just because all of these guys are not doing it the right way. And I hate to quote Joe Enders, who wrote an article. It kills me to compliment him here, but he wrote an article
kills all of us
recently. Yeah, I know. You know, his article recently talking about put your theology textbook down, or your theology book, or all of that stuff. Put it down for an hour, right? And go out and play sports. Put it down for an hour and go out and do something, right? And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because when you look at sports, you have recreational sport, you think of recess. You have competitive sport, you think of high school sports, and then you have professional sport, which I think I would put underneath that whole, obviously under competitive sport. But there's like a proper way to do these things, you know? And Aquinas and Aristotle, they talk about the virtue of play, the virtue of eutrapelia, right? Recreation. That's when you think of recess. And the whole point of that is to rest your soul, right? It's for the soul's rest. You can't be working all the time, right? You need to provide your soul with rest. It's just like sleep, or it's just like any sort, kicking your feet up when you get home. You have to do that, or else you're going to drive yourself crazy, right? And then with competitive sport, it's pretty simple. And it's interesting to look at what the popes have said, especially in the 20th century, when sports were just competitive sports specifically, where we're at their peak, which it hasn't been at. It hasn't been at the level in the history of humanity, really, where it's becoming this. People are actually making millions of dollars doing this. It's worldwide. Olympics, et cetera, et cetera. But the popes are very specific. They say the competitive sports, they're for no other end other than training people in the virtues. It's supposed to be a foundation for the spiritual life. And grace built on nature, right? Grace perfects nature. And that to me is something that a lot of people don't know. So when you look at these guys, I mean, you mentioned the BLM, BS, and the NFL, the NBA, all of this crap. They're not playing the game the right way. They're doing it for themselves, right? It's just pride at the end of the day. Most of them. I think some of them do it the right way. But when you see somebody do it the right way, it's a beautiful thing. You're like, that's, and you can identify it without even having somebody explain it to you. But that's the purpose of competitive sport. Pius X, Pius XII, John Paul II. It's for the development in the virtues.
Well, you missed the Pius too. Pius XI. Yeah. You got a great quote here. Yeah. Be Christians, but be virile. Practice the gospel and practice the sports. Do not neglect your soul or your body. And this is something that goes back to, I think you bring it up, and you just wrote an excellent paper on this. St. Paul has a lot of sports metaphors embedded in his work, showing that, he's not writing distastefully about sports. Quite the opposite. He's telling Christians to be sportsmen, or to mirror sportsmen in the spiritual life, which means he's gleaning some virtue, some excellence from those sports. Is he not?
Yeah, so it's really interesting with St. Paul, because when he's writing he's writing to the Corinthians, when he's talking about it's his first letter to the Corinthians, when he's talking about fight the good fight, win the race, don't just box for no reason, do it for a purpose. All of these sports analogies, right? So he's writing to these people who are baptized, right? He's writing to a church. He's writing to the baptized people, and he's reminding them, and he's using their language, right? How do you say the quote? All men to all people, or something. He's using their language, right? And it's like you said, people can read this how they want to and interpret it however they want to, because they think that they might think like the Puritans, or they might think like the kind of Gnostically about matter, where it's like the material world doesn't matter. But they'll think that this is a condemnation of sport, where he's like, do these things for the imperishable wreath. Right, and he's saying he's not condemning what they're doing. He's just using their language, and he's saying, no, use what the virtues that you have with regard to playing these sports, and just translate them. It's like transfer them over to the spiritual life, which is what we're all called to do. We all have our own talents, right? And even look what our Lord did when he recruited his apostles, Peter and Andrew, James and John. They were fishermen. He just says, okay, I'm going to make you fishers of men now. Right? They had that talent to do that. There's nothing wrong with fishing, right? I just want you to do this to build my kingdom. And they're not, they're not mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand. And another interesting point about St. Paul, when he's writing that letter, he's writing to, I think it's called the Isthmian Games. It's kind of a weird word. I don't know how to say it properly, but it's like essentially it's the Olympics, and they had it every 2 years. And he's writing to those people. They had that every 2 years, and he was there. He was there in Corinth when they were doing that, and so it's like this. Imagine going to I'm trying to think of Texas. You're gonna find football players in Texas, and you're going into their environment. So you use their language. You don't talk like a nerd to these people. You don't talk in these academic ways in such a way that they're not going to understand. It's going to go over their head. So he's using their language, and it's not a condemnation of sport. It's this is a good thing. I want you to use it, right, for what you're doing, and then more, right, for our Lord. So
far from condemning it, I mean, I would say that we are exhorted to engage in the sports, in the manly arts. And it's for this reason. I mean, we have this weird Manichaeism that's really entered into Catholicism, where it's like physical stuff bad, spirit good. And it's really, I don't think a lot of people think about it. They don't like cognate on it. But I think that's what drives them. That's an underlying assumption. But it's very wrong, because Catholicism, Christianity, has always seen this nexus, this integral nexus between the body and the soul. So in order to become a more excellent person spiritually, we've always noted that, we have to fast. We have to control the flesh. We have to chasten the body in order to chasten the soul, because we're a composite being. And I think that's lost on a lot of people. Or they think, because so many of the pleasures in the West are kind of like hedonistic, and what's fun is often sinful, I think people have started to go overboard and be like, well, anything that's fun is got to be a little bit sinful. Like, all you can do is garden and read, spiritual manuals. And that's just wrong. You have to be able to recreate, because it helps your prayer life. But beyond that, God gave us a sense of fun, a sense of enjoyment, because that's good. He created us. He gave us creation, which he says is good. And he wants us to enjoy his creation insofar as we're doing it in a just and well-ordered way. So when you're enjoying sport, you're enjoying the fruits of men's invention, of men's innovation. These things that we've taken our God-given intellects and free wills and created. Whether it be basketball or football or boxing, these things with a nicely defined set of rules that have human ingenuity behind them. We're using the tools that God gave us. We're using our rationality. We're using our intellects. We're using creation, all in a very good, positive way. So those things are excellent in and of themselves. But sports, beyond that, this is a really important point that hardly anybody ever makes. I hardly ever hear this made. And sports, by doing them, by enjoying yourself, by being drawn to become better at this thing, it's teaching us to practice excellence. And it's like this. You know how at first in the spiritual life, God gives you a lot of consolation in your prayers, and he later withdraws that consolation to bring you into closer union with him. You eventually go into the unitive way and whatnot. But it's not always this purgative way where, you know, you're far distant from God and you're saying a prayer and you get all of these spiritual consolations from it, and you want to pray because it's fun, it's enjoyable, and you're tasting the fruits of that very beneficial spiritual life. It's very much like that with sports. There's an analogy here, because sports are fun. So they're drawing you in. They're drawing especially young men to play them. And they're calling us to exert our energies pursuing them. And in so doing, it's also drawing us to want to be excellent at something. And the draw to want to be excellent is something that you habituate, and it doesn't just translate into the spiritual or into the temporal realm. It translates also into the spiritual realm. Like, for example, one time I was in confession, and the priest asked me if I was a germaphobe, because I was making a really, a thorough confession, and he thought, I think wrongly, actually, honestly, but he thought I was being scrupulous and confessing some stuff that he wouldn't necessarily have taken to confession. And he's like, are you germaphobe? I was like, that's a weird thing to ask. Why do you ask that? And it's because he sees that what you have in the physical realm is probably going to transfer over to the spiritual realm to some degree. So in sports, if you're being pulled to pursue excellence in this thing that's enjoyable, then you're going to habituate your pursuit of excellence, and that can take you into the moral life. That can take you and make you want to pursue excellence, and you'll have the ability, the capability to pursue excellence in the moral life, because now you've ingrained this good habit. Well, I mean, that's something, right? I think that gets neglected. I've never heard that articulated.
That's why they go hand. And that's why they go hand in hand. Like doing anything the right way necessarily involves the moral life, because it's like you said, you're developing certain habits. You're either developing good habits or your bad habits. And when you're talking about the body soul composite earlier, it's like, okay, well, we have a body and we have a soul, but it's not just that. Our soul underlies everything that we do. It animates the body, and it underlies every single action that we commit. So everything that we do, we're either going in the right direction or going in the wrong direction. And it's like you're developing certain habits, moral habits that affect, the rest of your life. And they don't just affect you, they affect others. But in sports, it's beautiful because, if you play them, you understand this. And if you do anything, if you're in school or if you play some sort of instrument or something, you also understand this. You can understand this in every aspect of life. It's like, I've always understood it three ways, and it just perfectly lines up with the Catholic understanding of virtue, or the Aristotelian definition of virtue, where it's like you do things the right way, you do them over and over and over and over and over again, right? And then you do them with passion, you do them with a degree of intensity. I always like the Kobe Bryant quote. He says, "Don't watch what I'm doing, watch how I'm doing it." Right? So you can be out there, you can be doing it the right way, you can be out there every single day doing it consistently. But if you're just phoning it in, it's like, well, you're not going to get any better. You're not developing a good habit. So you have to have, that's kind of my threefold understanding of like doing anything the right way, especially with sports. And, I played receiver in high school, or I played receiver in college. I ran track in high school. Any sport, it's like there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it based on the results that you're getting. And that's the beauty of it. You can see it with your eyes. You can see the numbers. You can see the progress. And in football, it's like you're playing receiver, there's a right way to do that. You run routes a certain way. You position your hands a certain way. You block a certain way. There's a technique, right? And then you just develop that throughout practice and working out outside of practice and outworking your teammates, outworking your competitors over and over and over again. And you do it with intensity, you do it with passion. You're going to get better. You have to have kind of a natural talent as well. But so many people don't understand that. There's like a cognitive. I remember when I was in high school, there were kids who were like, they had these, and I went to a big, probably 3,000 kids, probably more, public high school in just outside of Houston called Ridgepoint High School. And I'm pretty sure we had like 14, 15 kids go D1 in my class. I went D2. And there were people on our team every single year who had these goals. I'm going to go D1. Like, I'm going to play D1 ball. I'm going to go to the NFL, all this stuff. And, like, you would watch what they would do throughout practice. One day, like, they sucked. Like, they weren't good. And they had this like, ridiculous belief, I'm going to go D1. So not only did they not have, like, the natural ability, but they also didn't have the work ethic to back it up. And I was just thinking to myself, what is wrong with these people? Like, why do they that is, like, the biggest cognitive dissonance that I've ever seen in my whole entire life, where it's like, I've got this goal, and it's just so irrational, so unreasonable to think that I'm going to get there. But that's why I always like that process. Like, do it the right way, do it with passion, and you do it over and over again, and it's like good things will happen. And that's all virtue is. That's all virtue is. And you do the opposite of that, or you miss one of those, and it's a vice. And then you're developing bad habits, and then and then that affects your moral life, obviously in a bad way. But
let me even go one step further. Like, the absolute cream of the crop at any sport is, in a weird sense, even if it's not like a complete virtuous man, they're in a strange sense going to be fairly virtuous men. And I don't mean that meaning they're in the state of grace. I mean that if Michael Jordan wanted to be a saint, a canonized saint, he has the tools to do it. He has the drive.
Yeah.
Obviously, grace builds upon nature. He's got a lot of natural virtue. So if he put his mind to it, I have no doubt that Michael Jordan could cooperate with God's grace to such an extent that he could be a canonized saint, because he was a nut about basketball. It wasn't just that Michael Jordan had all the talent in the world, which he did. He was a nut about practicing basketball. Like, there's stories about him, like, even with other things like golf. Obviously, he played a lot of sports well. One story is that he beat somebody, or he lost to somebody at golf. And then he went and woke the guy up at like 6 a.m. the next morning, pounding on his hotel room, and was like, we got to play again because I want to win. And he worked harder than anyone. Now, you can be pretty good at something like LeBron James, for example. He's a top 10 basketball player, but you know why he's not number one? You know why he's never going to be Jordan? I don't know exactly where their athleticism lines up. Michael Jordan was an athletic freak. LeBron James is an athletic freak. But you know why LeBron lost all those championships where Jordan didn't? You know why LeBron is not going to be number one in all these categories where Jordan was? It's because he doesn't have the natural virtue to be a Jordan.
And dude, that's why those guys, in my opinion, and it sounds like in your opinion as well, those guys are a lot closer to a decent or even a solid spiritual life than the intellectuals who have all the knowledge in the world and are just cowards, and they don't do anything with it. Our Lord says, to whom much is given, much is demanded, right? Much is required. And all virtue, we're talking about virtue ends in the will. Even the intellectual virtues like prudence, it's knowing the means to attain the end, right? Knowing the goal, knowing the means to attain the goal, and actually getting up and doing it. All virtues end in the will. So if you have all the knowledge in the world, like these, to go back to Enders' article, you got all the knowledge in the world. You don't do anything with it because you're a coward. It's like, in my opinion, I think a guy like MJ or Kobe or, a lot of these athletes like Brady or something, they're a lot closer to a solid spiritual life than these academics, because these academics know the truth. They're just choosing to not live according to it. And that's the whole thing, dude. It's like, and that's what sports demands out of you. You can't just talk a big game. You can't do it because you look like an idiot when you get out on the field. And if you're, in football, you get locked up as a receiver. If you're on the basketball court, you can't put the ball in the bucket. You play for 30 minutes and you've got like 1 point. People know, and it's embarrassing. It's humiliating. And that's the beauty of sport, is it demands these natural virtues like discipline, self-control, determination, prudence. You have to have courage. All of these things, you have to have them. If you don't have them, if you choose not to pursue them, you're going to suck at whatever sport it is that you're playing or trying to play.
That's right. I just wanted to throw in, because you were giving this list of people who pursued these virtues, and they kind of grabbed them with both hands. And obviously, I wrote the article about Bobby Fischer, who I think ultimately became a Catholic at the end of his life, and he requested a Catholic burial. He was in talks with a Catholic who was sending him materials, and he was requesting more. So there's, you can check that out on churchmilitant.com. But and another guy just with natural virtue. You know why he was the number one chess player I think of all time? First of all, because he had natural raw genius IQ. But second of all, because all he did was pursue chess. He taught himself Russian so he could read Russian magazines and read about chess. And I remember there's one story where Russian grandmasters were like, how did you think of this move to make in response to this opening? And he was like, I read it in a footnote in one of your magazines from a woman's game. And the Russian grandmaster who was asking about this was like, oh my gosh, this guy, he not only does he read Russian periodicals about chess, and he's like taught himself our language, but he's also reading about our women's grandmasters games, which no one really did. So it just shows people who become number one at something have inculcated a self-mastery that other people simply do not have. And sports are naturally pushing you toward that. Like a river carrying a stick. They're pulling you to pursue excellence because you're like, wow, I love basketball. I love it a lot. I want to eat, sleep, drink basketball and play it all day. And you know what? I don't just want to play it and be mediocre. I want to be great at it. And it's pulling you in. And it's teaching you that if you want to really get good at something, if you want to succeed at something, you have to work your butt off. You have to do what everybody else doesn't want to do. And that's a real skill. Like, I'm sure Bobby Fischer would want to be playing with other kids in, like, Brooklyn, where he grew up. He probably heard them outside on the street, like, doing whatever Brooklyn kids do, like playing stickball or whatever. But he was in there studying chess and like learning Russian, and that's what it takes. And that translates to the moral life. If you're going to be a good Catholic, you're going to hear all the other people out there living their day-to-day lives, watching smutty TV, doing things, dressing immodestly, doing things that we can't do. And only somebody who's committed to pursuing excellence in the moral life and the spiritual life is going to be like, no, I don't want that. That's not for me. Yeah.
And God, like, God created sport. He created everything, obviously, for a purpose. So if you're going to pursue whatever it is, if you're going to pursue, music, or if you're going to pursue, like, being a doctor, or, pursue some sort of sport, it's like, he doesn't want you to kind of have, like, 1 foot in. He wants you to do these things the right way. He wants you to play them the right way. He wants you to study them the right way. He wants you to do these things the right way, because all of these things lead to him, like you said. That's why it's a cool that story with Fischer. It's so interesting because he there's a lot of evidence that points to the fact that he converted to the faith before he died, and all that. And that's like the perfect example. It's like you do this thing your whole life and you pursue it honestly, and you pursue it how it ought to be pursued, and play it the right way and things like all of that stuff. You're doing these things and it's slowly leading you, whether you know it or not, it's leading you closer to God. I remember when I was in, I mean, I've always taken football seriously. My dad played in college. He played in the league. He played in the CFL. And obviously, I'm from Texas, so you pop out the womb and you start playing ball. But like that, I believe in my own spiritual life, it made it easier to live a decently virtuous life. And obviously, it's not easy, but the goal is so much bigger. So, heaven, seeing God face to face, participating in His glory, right? Versus I don't know, the peak of athleticism would just be like, winning a couple Super Bowls or whatever it may be. But it's like, and this is what I don't understand from Christians, and it's even more shocking with Catholics because we know the truth, right? We have it right there, where it's like they think that making it to heaven, this goal that's just like way up here, right, is going to somehow be easier than being an elite athlete or like, getting your doctorate, which is like not even, you can't even compare the two. So you think it's harder to do that than to get to heaven. It makes absolutely no sense. And we know that's not true. But at the very least, it prepares you for the spiritual life, which we know is a life of combat, a life of carrying your cross, getting rid of your pride, right? Having to be, open to humiliation, so you can be humble, and all of these things, and the virtues just follow that. But it blows my mind that people think like that, and it kind of, it's just ridiculous. I don't understand on a natural level. You don't really need faith to understand the like incongruity there.
That's right. And to pivot from this to a certain extent, there's a very practical application for growing in athletic prowess. And it's just like, as a Christian man, you need to be able to defend your family. You need to be able to attract a mate, to somebody who's going to want to enter into wedlock with you. I see a lot of weak, limp-wristed, kind of chubby, like skinny fat guys out there who are looks like they're henpecked by their wives. And part of me wonders, like, I wonder if they had like a better physique and were like good at sports and were a figure that this woman could actually kind of look up to more. I wonder if these guys would be more in the rightly ordered position of headship in their house. And there is something to be said for looking up to somebody. Like there's a reason we use that expression, because people of tall stature, and this is a natural way that you know that God ordered men towards leadership, is because he made us bigger. There's a sexual dichotomy. There's this juxtaposition between the male physiology and the female physiology, where the males are the bigger of the two. We have bigger bones, we have bigger muscles, we have deeper voices for commanding. We are bigger. So women look up to us. There's something to be said for that. So I wonder if a lot of these weak, uxorious, henpecked men would honestly command more respect from their wives if they just were bigger of stature. And even if you can't make yourself taller, but if you were huskier, if you're stronger, if you had skills that this lady admired. I see there's some literature out there. There's a lot of bitter guys now that are like kind of incels that write on this stuff. And they're like, well, women they want to go around, they want to party, they want to be promiscuous, and then they want to settle down and find a stable guy. So they go and find these beta males that they can kind of boss around and who will be happy to be married to absolutely anybody. And then they'll marry those kinds of guys. But it's like, if you're a rugged, like chiseled, skilled man, you're not going to be having to fight for the scraps for women who've been promiscuous most of their lives, who aren't going to make good and faithful and domestic wives. You won't have to put up with that, because you'll find some woman who really can admire you for who you are. A lot of guys think like it's in the movies, like, oh, I'm this guy and I have a heart of gold, but my exterior is decrepit and wimpy and I don't have good hygiene and all that. But some woman's going to see me for who I am. But it's like, hey, bud, your bad hygiene, your wimpy physique, that says something about who you are. Because we are a composite of form and matter. You're the kind of guy who's slovenly. You can't be bothered to care about your appearance. You can't be bothered to hit the weights. You can't be bothered to learn skills. Yet you want a woman who's going to be well-groomed and tidy and well-appointed and probably know how to cook, and whose nice hourglass figure I mean, some guys will lie and they'll be like, no, I don't care about that stuff. But they do. They do. It's natural. It's good to want those things. Like, who are you? Why would a 10 bombshell-looking girl go for you, the wimpy guy who has no skills to offer, who couldn't defend her? Why wouldn't, even if you have a heart of gold, why wouldn't she go for, like, she's a 10. She can get whoever she wants. Why wouldn't she go for the guy who's really attractive, is taking care of himself, who probably knows man skills, and who has a heart of gold? Like, what about that? So sports are preparing us to be men. They're preparing us to be able to do physical things that you're going to need to do around the house. Your wife's going to ask you to open a jar of pickles, and these guys with the limp wrists who never spent a day in their lives doing anything athletic, they're going to be like,
all right, go get a jar. Dave, go get a jar of pickles right now.
Yeah, exactly. Flush out the koshers. No, man, what do you think? Sorry, I've been rambling.
No, I was just thinking to myself as you were talking, you need to hit the weight room, is exactly what I was thinking. No? Yeah.
I did like 50
no, I was
yesterday, dog.
Well, you think about no, I was thinking of because I think there's something to that. I haven't put much thought into it. I think there's something to that, but I was thinking of kind of the inverse, where you have and this is what I saw, what I have seen, this is what anybody who's played sports has seen. I saw it in college. I'm sure that everybody sees it to some degree, but you have the dudes that do have that physique. They're 6'5", just cut, yoked. They're the best athlete or whatever, but they're cowards and they're drunkards and they are not actually doing what they're telling everybody else to do. It's like that opposite, where it's like you have all of the, you kind of look like somebody who's got some natural virtue and you say the right things. I remember when I first got to college, and I mean, I guess I'm throwing some people under the bus if but that's fine.
Flame on.
But when I first got there, dude, we had leaders on the team that were these big, huge dudes. They were okay. They weren't. I don't think they were our better players. They were all right. But they would get up and they would get in front of everybody and they would, say, "Hey, we need to get better at this. We're going to go out there. We're going to do this." They were the leaders on the team. But these were the guys getting hammered 3 out of the, 3 days of the week, even after losses, which you just don't do. If you play sport, you don't get hammered. You don't go out and drink after you just get your tail whooped. You don't do that. These were the guys that were doing that. They were not putting in work outside of our normal workouts, outside of practice. So it's like, dude, I'm not going to listen to what you have to say. You're not practicing what you're preaching. You can't, the philosophical, truth of just, you can't give what you don't have. So you're over here trying to tell me what to do. You don't have it yourself. You saw, and you're not even that good of a football player. And you don't work very hard. So it's that opposite, where it's like you have everything on the physical level, but inside you're a coward. Inside you're a hypocrite. And it's like thinking about like evangelizing somebody. That's why the best way to evangelize somebody is just by living the faith. It does 10 times more to just live out your faith, and for some people to see that, and then they'll kind of change their life. And you'll never know what happened, but that's the best way to do it, rather than saying all these things. It's good to say things. You need to do that.
But you have
time
to.
And a place for
right.
that. You have to. Yeah, you can't just keep your mouth shut your whole life. There are occasions, and more so than we're told, that you need to speak out. But the best way to evangelize somebody, change somebody's life, is to just by do it yourself. Like, that's the first rule of fraternal correction. I've tried to listen to talks on this because it's kind of hard, and you and I have talked about this a lot. It's like, how do you handle this situation? How do you handle that situation? And those are just questions of fraternal correction. But I've always understood that the best way to do that is, okay, get the pluck out of your own, get the stick out of your own eye, right? That just means get your own interior life in place, make that solid, and then you can worry about the other stuff. But that's always the first rule. Make sure you're not being a hypocrite. Do this stuff yourself. Get solid inside, and get your soul straight, and then kind of take it from there. But so many people kind of do the opposite. They just point at everybody else, and they don't understand that they're just, first of all, no one's probably listening to you because they know you're being a hypocrite, and second of all, you're not walking the walk. But
Well, dude, what you said earlier is interesting, though, because there can be these gifted college athletes that do lack a natural virtue, and it's a little bit paradoxical, and this is why I don't like the college fetish. Like, people are like, oh, college athletes are so much better. They're so much purer of heart and motive than professional athletes. I don't watch the pros. It's like poppycock, horse feathers. Because what happened to Johnny Manziel in the pros? He was terrible. He sucked. What happened to Ryan Leaf in the pros? Terrible. Sucked. What happened to Christian Laettner in the NBA? Nothing. Nobody. So you can be a college athlete and be really successful at that pretty high level, but unless you have at least a strong drive for excellence, you will fizzle out in the pros with the real professionals once you hit like the NBA, the NHL, the MLB, the NFL, all of these things. You can be a good amateur boxer, but never be an absolute beast in professional. Like Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe was probably one of the most talented heavyweights who ever lived. But he was able to be very successful for a while, but ultimately he didn't have like the reign of a Lennox Lewis because he could not control himself and really get down to training and not put on tons of weight in between bouts. So he never lived up to his potential. Now, that was in the pros, but the beauty of professional competition is that it drives you to succeed, and in driving you to succeed, in building up these virtues, in building up work ethic, it actually helps separate the wheat from the chaff, because you were on a team like where you saw a lot of your peers, and they were probably guys that, as you say, were not virtuous, but they're coasting on these like just mammoth physical gifts. Like some kids that I saw in like 7th grade in AAU could just dunk. And it's like you can't just teach that. Either you're a 7th grader who can dunk, who went like through puberty when you were like 7 years old, or you're not. And a lot of guys will coast, right?
Yeah. Everybody, and you see that at every level. People coast in high school, people coast in college, people obviously coast in the pros. It's just complacency, though. I mean, people get complacent, and you do that at any level, and it's like you said, you're not trying to be great, you're not trying to be excellent. And I keep going back to Kobe because obviously he's a good example, at least with basketball, some natural virtue. He might have got a little bit close to, I don't know, idolizing the game a little bit and things like that, but when he got to the NBA, he said that he went to what is called Goat Mountain. He went to MJ. He went to Larry Bird. He went to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He went to all these greats, and he just picked their brain. And he went to I think he went to 5 of them. I can't remember the other 2. And obviously MJ was kind of like his mentor. He was definitely his mentor when he was there in the league. But he picked their brains, and he kind of just like, okay, I got that, and he applied it to his own work. And that's why he was so he was obviously a crazy good basketball player, but his work ethic was it was through the roof. People would I remember there's a story of one guy asking him to come out and drink and party with the team, and Kobe was like, yeah, I'll go do that under one condition, that you that you wake up at like 3:30 in the morning and work out with me. And he was like, all right. And so they went out and partied, and I don't remember the end of the story, but I mean, Kobe woke up, and I don't know if the other guy did, but that was like the condition for him going out. And it's just this crazy work ethic, and it's just the opposite. He never got complacent. That's why he was so good. And you obviously can't get complacent in the spiritual life, because you're not at that point. You're not picking up your cross. You're not carrying it. It gets harder and harder. But the longer you're in it, right, the longer that you're practicing these virtues, they do become easier in the sense that you'd rather die than these virtues up. It'd be very hard, because, and it's the opposite with vice. You're just digging yourself in a hole, and the more and more that you are digging yourself in that hole, the more impossible almost it is to come out of it. That's why when you go to confession, and I didn't know this for a number of years, you go to confession, you confess your sins. Yeah, if have a, you're contrite about it, and the priest gives you absolution, and you say your penance and all that stuff. Your sins are forgiven, but like you still have this the temporal effects of sin with like regard to the habits that you just developed. And if if you're confessing them, then you probably bad habits, like if you have a porn habit or something, you confess your sin, you still got to get rid of, dude. You still got to get rid of the habit, and that's the case with anything. You still have to get rid of those things. And you do that by doing the opposite, by practicing good habits.
Well, Trey, just to kind of bring this around to the close, I would ask you, and I know there are probably some parents out there tonight wondering, should we introduce our young boys to sports? Should we get them involved in these things? What would you say as like a Catholic sportsman yourself? What's your advice?
I mean, I'd say it depends, but in general, I'd say it's a good idea, especially with regard to like the climate that we're in right now. I mean, I think that's you put your kids in sports, you play them the right way, you even play them like decently, right? They completely oppose this whole relativistic, nihilistic, hedonistic culture that we're in. Right? Relativism, the idea there's no truth, there's no objective truth. Nihilism, there's no purpose. Right? Hedonism, if it feels good, do it. All of these things are completely antithetical to any honest sport. Football, basketball, baseball, anything, any sport, you play it the right way, or even kind of play it the right way. They completely oppose those things, and that's why you have to do these things the right way. You can't. People play sports for their own selfish reasons, their own subjective reasons, and I guess you can kind of conform that to the culture with regard to relativism and hedonism and things like that. But in general, it's like, well, how do sports oppose relativism? Well, sports are objective. You win or you lose, right? There's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this. If you do them the right way, you're going to be better at, say with track, you're going to be faster. You do it the wrong way and you swing your arms like this, well, you're going to be slower. It's objective. There's right and wrong. There's a winner. There's a loser. How's it antithetical to nihilism? The fact that there's no purpose. Well, what's the purpose of sports even for an atheist? It's to win the game, right? And you do that a certain way. And then hedonism, you have to control your passions. You have to have control and submit your passions to right reason. You have to do that in sports, because if you just kind of run wild with whatever you want to do, well, you're not going to be playing the game the right way. You're going to be all over the map, and you're not going to be able to order yourself in the way that you need to get the job done, whatever it is. So I think it's important, especially with regard to kind of what kind of world we're living in right now.
Right. And just to tack on to that, it's fine and good if you want to do the spiritual life, but you're not going to be able to do that for very long if you can't take care of your body, because you're going to run into all kinds of health issues. This is a serious point. It sounds like a throwaway, but it's a real thing, because even like being mid-30s, like you start to get little things going wrong. And if you don't take care of yourself at all, and you don't know how to take care of yourself, and you've never been kind of pushed to take care of yourself, then you start getting like diabetic. You start getting like seriously overweight, which can affect the liver. You start getting to the point where you can't run down the block without being completely out of breath, and that's a real thing. That gets in the way of parenting. You have no energy. You have no energy to be up with your kids, to sit down on the living room floor and play ball with them. There's so many practical things that sports teach, and they teach things that are beyond practical. As you note, they teach things that are enduring, things that actually will affect what happens to us in our final destination, our final judgment.
And I do want to, because you just said that, I want to read three quick quotes from these popes. Pope Pius X says, "The material exercises of the body," talking about sport, "it's the material exercise of the body that will admirably influence the exercise of the spirit." So it's exactly what you just said. And then Pius XII says, "All natural virtues," it's a sport of all natural virtues, but which provide the supernatural virtues with a solid foundation. That's exactly what we're saying. Grace builds on nature. Grace perfects nature. These things lead right to God. And then finally, JP2, sport is the practice of Christian virtues, a school of religious education. And they're not talking about recreational sport. They're not talking about recess. They're talking about competitive sport. They're talking about competitive sport. This is 1905 Pius X. This is 1945 Pius XII. And this is 1985 JP2. That's the point of sports, and it's a beautiful thing. It's everything that we've talked. It's everything the church teaches, right? Faith and reason are friends. They don't oppose each other. Grace and nature, they work together. Grace builds on these natural things. It builds on sports, and that's why no pope has ever came out and condemned competitive sport. Nobody has. Even Pope Francis, who's that's our Holy Father. But he's a liberal. He wrote a whole encyclical on sport. And I think it was 2019 he wrote that, and he's quoting these same things. So it's cool. The church has protected this gem of culture that I think plays a big role in culture and can lead a lot of people to our Lord and to his church.
Well, I think it's just to put a little bit of a flourish on here at the end. I don't think it's any accident that a lot of top athletes are not even just specifically Christian, but are Catholic. If you look at boxing, if the only undefeated heavyweight champ ever, Rocky Marciano, 49-0. Even the current lineal heavyweight champ, Tyson Fury, Catholic. Tom Brady's a lapsed Catholic, but who knows what holdover he has from his childhood and kind of understanding some of these basic natural virtues at some level. Or Kobe Bryant himself, Catholic, when he died in a helicopter crash. He just gotten done with confession and mass with his daughter, right? It seems to be there are a lot of Catholic top athletes. I think partly because just by living in the Catholic world, they've kind of imbibed some of our push towards actual excellence in the lived out life, cooperating with God's graces in a sense.
And if you're a Catholic, you have the correct understanding of the world. You have a proper understanding, the correct understanding of like how things work. And you don't say that in an arrogant way. You just say that because that's how it is. What does Protestantism teach? Faith alone. What does Catholicism teach? What does Scripture teach? Faith without works is dead, right? You can't just have this this so-called belief in God somehow, and then you're just good to go. No, Catholicism is the opposite. Catholicism is I've got faith, right? But then I pick up my cross. That faith, right, is what precedes hope and charity, and you picking up your cross and carrying it every single day. And you don't have any guarantee of salvation. There's no guarantee. It's just like there's no guarantee in sports. You can check all the right boxes with everything. And to go back to a couple years ago, I was trying to keep playing football after college. In my opinion, in my head, I checked all the right boxes. I got I had a good senior year. I had good stats. I had the right weight. My body was feeling good. I was running fast, doing all these things, talking to scouts, all of that stuff. Check all the right boxes. But you're never guaranteed anything. Even these guys that go to the NFL Combine, which is almost a guarantee that you're going to get drafted, they don't get drafted. They don't make it to the NFL. So there's no guarantees. And I think what you said makes a lot of sense, and it really highlights the fact that Catholicism is true because it sees all these things the right way, the correct way. And all of these other beliefs, even in Christianity with Protestantism, it has a ridiculous worldview. And even when you compare it to sports, it's even more ridiculous because there's no work involved. There's no picking up your cross every single day and carrying it, fearing your salvation. Like St. Paul said, work out your salvation in fear and trembling. This is a dude who was shipwrecked, who was beaten, who just, lived a more holy life than, anybody except, I guess, our Lord and Our Lady and the saints and maybe Francis Assisi or something. I don't know. But this is a dude who was living it out, and he was saying these things. And you got Luther and Calvin with these ridiculous ideas, but it kind of hits on the theological realities with regard to athletics and all that stuff.
That's why Notre Dame's the Fighting Irish. They're whooping all the Protestant schools because we get it. Yeah. We Catholics get it. You have to work. You have to cooperate. You have to do your part. You have to do your part in your salvation. Yeah.
Yeah, it only makes sense. Even when people outside the faith who don't believe or anything like that, when they hear this this ridiculous idea that, I gave my my life to Christ when I was like 16 years old, and I'm now saved. People from outside the faith, from outside Christianity, they hear that stuff and they just naturally think that's a bunch of BS. That's got to be a bunch of BS.
Right.
You're gonna get to heaven because you said, you made this confession to God that you're giving your life. It's like, that's good. That's a good thing, but you're gonna be saved because you did that. That's a bunch of BS, and it is.
Right.
When people hear the reality of the theology, the spiritual life, the deep interior life, I mean, you're talking about the purgative way, the illuminative way, the unitive, all that stuff. That's what people, when they hear that, they're like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense, because it kind of coincides, kind of goes right along with just my own life over here, where things are hard. Right. I got to pick up my cross, my cross, my worldly cross. You have to do that in the world. Of course, you got to do it in the spiritual life on a much more deep and tough degree.
Right. And just to cap this off, absolutely, dude. Saying I was saved, like when I was in 6th grade or whatever, and I, got baptized by the Holy Spirit and offered my life to Jesus Christ. Saying I'm saved forever based on that is like a 6th grade top of the line athlete being like, I'm getting into the NFL because I'm like good now. I'm good now, so I'm going to be good later on. That's not how it works in life. You got to keep grinding, and sports teach us that. So with that, man, I know you're busy. You got stuff going on tonight. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. God bless you. And I guess let's sign it off.